The gear behind John Mayer's solos, episode 4, Covered in Rain, live at Jones Beach on July 21st, 2010. So we're going to the Battle Studies era today, and Covered in Rain, whenever John performs it, it's honestly such a treat because the solos are always fantastic, and I'm going to do a video in this series on the forum performance of Covered in Rain during the 2019 World Tour, but I thought it'd be fun to actually go back to 2010 because this one is a performance that is not that often talked about, but I really love this specific one. So we're going to take a listen to the solo. It's rather long, but that's going to be a nice treat for this episode, and then I'll go and discuss all of the gear that I think and kind of theorized John was using, because with that Bradshaw switching system makes it a little bit harder to actually know what he was using. Hopefully you guys can agree with me that that was a really great version of the Covered in Rain solo, and the Battle Studies era has a lot of hidden gems like this from it. It's not one that people often talk about as being a really great tone era of John's. You know, you always hear about Continuum, Born and Raised Paradise Valley, and then 2019 World Tour kind of being a few highlights that people always go back and reference. But there are some really great tones from the Battle Studies era, and solo tones especially, that I'll be covering in this series. There's another one that I really, really love that I'm going to be doing as part of this series too as well. But the guitar, just diving right on into it, the guitar that we saw John using there, being the real treat about this performance, being his 1996 Stevie Ray Vaughan signature Stratocaster. This being the guitar that famously had underwound Texas Special pickups in it that then the Big Dippers were kind of based off of. So this is a very unique guitar that really shaped John's sound early on in his career, like the Heavier Things era and the Room for Squares era as well, Any Given Thursday. Those tones were all heavily with this guitar being, you know, one that we always will go back to and reference, like performances like City Love at Crossroads, like just absolutely unreal. Now, in terms of the amp rig for the Battle Studies era, there were a few tweaks and changes to it, but mainly what we saw was the Two-Rock John Mayer signature Dumble Steel String Singer 002, and then a Fender Bandmaster, which actually sat on top of the pedal rack unit, but that was plugged into one of the Alessandro cabinets. So you had 4 Alessandro cabs in total, 3 of them were mic'd. Now, few things here. That Fender Bandmaster, there's a heavy theory that goes around that it might be an Ultraphonics modded by Dumble Fender Bandmaster. We have no way of absolutely knowing for 100% certainty, but there is that kind of question that always gets raised with that specific Bandmaster from the Battle Studies era. And then as well, in terms of the speakers, we've seen John using a few different speakers when it comes to his Alessandro cabinets, G1265s, Celestion Centuries, Celestion Golds, and then Alessandro Neos as well, I believe, were all different kinds of speakers that we've seen John using within Alessandro cabinets. During the Battle Studies era, I'm not exactly sure what John was using, but those kind of give you some ideas of what we might be actually seeing in those speakers being used. Like I mentioned, only 3 of them were mic'd, but just the way it all worked out, 2 Alessandro cabinets, then the Two-Rock and the Dumble, and then the Bandmaster off to the side. That kind of created the amp rig for the Battle Studies era. Now, when it comes to the pedals that John would have been using for that solo, here's where some of the guesswork obviously is going to come into play here, because John had the rack unit with all of the pedals in it, and then had a custom audio electronics controller on the floor for all of the switches. So it's a little hard to actually know what John was using, and from this footage we actually don't get any shots of his feet hitting anything. But let's get into it in some kind of theories and likely things I think was going on. So for Covered in Rain, something I've seen John doing before just by having a shot of a pedal board and the LED being on is that the Keeley Katana has been on in the past as a clean boost for the main kind of bass Covered in Rain tone. So I think that's pretty likely that John is doing the exact same thing here. Now when it comes to the pedals that John was using for the actual solo, the drive pedals, in the rack unit there we have the Marshall Bluesbreaker Mark I, the Klon Centaur, and the Ibanez TS10. This Battle Studies era is famous when John started experimenting with the Bluesbreaker and the Klon Centaur. Of course, as we know, the Bluesbreaker would be dropped in favor of the Klon Centaur going forward, but John very much was experimenting with these drive pedals, and there's even at least one preset that exists on his board on the Bradshaw unit that actually had just the Klon Centaur and Marshall Bluesbreaker together. So he was even experimenting without the TS10, which is pretty cool. But for this solo, you see John look down as he's about to launch into the solo and step on 2 different pedals. Now, or 2 different switches, I guess, technically, for the Bradshaw unit. At this point, I do think the Keeley Katana was on the entire time. So then John is stacking what sounds like 2 different drive pedals. He steps on one, and then another, and then you kind of get to the level that we have for the remainder of the solo. So I think what John was stepping on was something in combination with the TS10. That is kind of the quintessential Covered in Rain tone, is a tube screamer. So I believe he's stacking something into the TS10, maybe the Bluesbreakers, that would be a little bit more lower gain, not quite as heavy as what I believe the Klon Centaur stacking into it would have done, or even if the TS10 at this time was placed after the Klon Centaur. It's very hard to say. But that's kind of what I think is going on there. Kila Kitana's on, then he steps on the Bluesbreaker and TS10 just to boost things a little bit more. TS10 first, and then he's like, okay, like let's just give it a little bit more there, and then that's the solo tone. Then a little later on in the solo, John actually goes back to the controller and steps on something else. Now, when we go back and we're going to listen to that moment again, but when John steps on it, you don't actually hear the solo getting louder, there's not more gain added or anything like that, so it's not a drive pedal. You'd know, for example, if he was kicking something else on, so I don't think that's what he was doing here. What I think he was doing is adding in possibly the Eventide time factor. He had two in the rack unit, one of them was just that he could use for just delay that he could add on at any moment. And the label was actually tape on that Bradshaw controller. So I think that's what John turns on there. And it kind of makes sense too as he's kind of going to start to turn the volume down a little bit and the solo mellows out. And then of course it ramps back up again. But he wouldn't step on another drive pedal as well if then he's just going to kind of, the solo is going to start to mellow out. It just doesn't make sense in that context either. So I think that's what we're hearing there. The audio from this shot, from this footage, is pretty close to the stage, so it's kind of hard to hear if there's any actual delays going on from, the audio here. But I think that's probably what John was doing. The only other thing we haven't talked about in terms of delays is that it's possible that John's Way Huge Aquapus Mark I AP2 version could have been on the entire time as well. Slapback is something we've seen John using just kind of when he feels like it, even like I've seen him turn it on for Gravity the entire time before. So Covered in Rain to me seems like one where Slapback would really add just a little bit more feel even to his playing for this song, and it would really work. So it's possible that that was on the entire time too, but it's very hard to say, unfortunately. And just listening to that moment again when John is soloing, goes and steps on the controller and then keeps soloing, if he would have stepped on the Bluesbreaker or the Klon Centaur, for example, to gain stack into the TS10, you'd hear that volume jump, you'd hear the gain increase, you'd be like, all right, the solo's ramping up, not actually going to go a bit more mellow. So that's why I am pretty certain, decently certain, that it'd be the Eventide time factor he's doing there. The audio from this version, it's kind of hard to hear if there's really any delays going on, especially kind of that close proximity to the stage. You're getting a lot of just actual like stage volume hitting you, but that's what I kind of think John was doing there. But this performance at Jones Beach, I just really love, and it's one that I had more recently discovered actually and stumbled upon, but I just think it's really cool. The footage is really great too, and just a different performance from the Battle Studies era that, it's not one that people, I feel like, really go back to and discuss. And that's kind of part of the purpose of the series, is to bring out solos and talk about them that maybe you guys haven't seen. This one's got over 100,000 views, but still, this is the first time I've seen it very recently. So maybe this is the first time you guys have seen it too. And as always, you guys, if you are enjoying the series, I appreciate all the comments in the previous episodes, letting me know that you're wanting me to keep doing it, number one, and giving me other ideas for solos you want to see me cover. So if there are any more that you want to see me cover in the series, let me know in the comments down below. And I think it's going to be a mainstay series on the channel. Once we're done the 7 episodes in a row to kick it off, I think it's going to be a nice weekly video I'll do on the channel that we kind of tackle a new solo every week, discuss it, break it down in full. Be fun. So anyways, you guys, thanks so much for watching. Again, if you made it all the way to the end, I really appreciate you. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.